To understand the U.S. war in Vietnam, the first step is to grasp why this Southeast Asian country on the other side of the world became a place of political crisis and military confrontation in the years following the Second World War. What, in short, were the roots of America's conflict in Vietnam? The story begins in the late 19th century when France, one of the great European powers of the day, established colonial control over Vietnam, along with neighboring Laos and Cambodia. There was nothing particularly extraordinary about this development. Vast parts of Asia, Africa, and the Middle East fell under European domination around the same time. And as in many of those places, colonialism profoundly altered life in Vietnam. A few Vietnamese benefited by serving the colonial authorities or by cashing in on economic opportunities that the French created. For the vast majority of Vietnamese, though, colonization brought tremendous hardship. In part, the damage was psychological or even spiritual. The subjugation of Vietnam by a confident, technologically advanced France led many Vietnamese to doubt the traditional political, ideological, and even religious underpinnings of their society. But the much more urgent problem for the vast majority of the Vietnamese population was economic. French policies mostly served to enrich investors eager to transform Vietnam into an exporter of goods for the global market. French economic policies prized efficiency and profitability, objectives that could best be served by concentrating land in the hands of small numbers of technologically advanced producers. All of this accompanied by the introduction of a cash economy, taxation, and state monopolies on basic commodities like salt and alcohol badly hurt Vietnam's vast population of subsistence farmers. Huge disparities of wealth and power grew ever wider between the wealthy few and the impoverished multitude. Vietnamese who were lucky enough to find work on plantations often discovered brutal working conditions and harsh discipline for those who broke the rules. Well, what was the effect of all of these changes to Vietnamese society? Here is where we can start to see the origins of conflict in the 20th century. Economic desperation, along with political and ideological crisis, led many Vietnamese to demand an end to French control and a new political order in their nation. Colonial domination, in other words, stirred a powerful nationalist movement aimed at Vietnamese independence and the reconfiguration of the country's political and economic life. The first stirrings of this movement were visible in the early years of the 20th century, when nationalist intellectuals began to attract followings through their writings about the need for national renewal. Over time, though, Ho Chi Minh far surpassed any of his predecessors and became the key figure in the rising Vietnamese nationalist movement. Ho's early life reveals many of the qualities that made him so effective. He was born into a well-educated family, drawn powerfully to nationalist thinking. As a teenager, he became sympathetic to the plight of the Vietnamese peasantry and took a leadership role in protests against rising taxes and coercive labor policies. These activities made him suspect in the eyes of French authorities, and to escape arrest, he fled abroad in 1911. Remarkably, Ho lived outside his native Vietnam for the next 30 years. Bouncing from Britain to the United States to France and then the Soviet Union and China, Ho gradually gained influence among the Vietnamese expatriate communities where nationalist currents ran strong. One of the most important moments came in 1918, when just after the end of the First World War, Woodrow Wilson joined other world leaders at Versailles outside Paris to draft peace treaties. Ho Chi Minh and other Vietnamese nationalists submitted a series of demands to the assembled leaders, asking them to grant autonomy to Vietnam and other colonized territories. In this way, Ho asked the Western powers to live up to the very principles of liberty and self-determination that they had espoused in waging the just concluded World War. In the event, though, Wilson and the other leaders barely noticed Ho's appeal and showed no interest in independence for Vietnam or any other colonial territories. Deeply disappointed, Ho made a crucial tactical decision. He moved sharply to the left, turning his attention away from the democratic West and now viewing the Soviet Union and communism more generally as the political force that was most likely to help him achieve his goal of Vietnamese independence. In this way, Ho grafted communism onto anti-colonial nationalism, creating this complex blend of ideologies that would underpin the Vietnamese revolutionary movement for decades to come. Ho Chi Minh's turn toward communism in the 1920s and 1930s is easy to see. In 1920, he became a founding member of the French Communist Party. For the next few years, he lived in Moscow, working as an official for the bureaucracy that was dedicated to spreading communism internationally. And then, in 1924, he returned finally to East Asia, not to Vietnam, but to southeastern China, where he promoted revolution among the large Vietnamese community in that area. Ho's ability to blend anti-colonialism and revolutionary communism, his personal charisma, and his organizational skills made him a great success in this work. But the fortunes of his movement experienced wild swings as the political winds blew in different directions during the turbulent 1930s and 1940s. The Great Depression of the 1930s at first fueled powerful new unrest in Vietnam that worked in Ho Chi Minh's favor. But crackdowns on his movement badly weakened it as the decade advanced. And by the late 1930s, little was going well for Ho. But then came the golden opportunity for Ho Chi Minh: the outbreak of the Second World War in the Far East. German and Japanese aggression badly weakened France, raising doubts about whether it could hold on to its overseas possessions over the long run. Meanwhile, Soviet and then US entry into the war meant that two nations powerfully critical of European colonialism would have major voices in the peace settlement that ended the war and created a new global order. Encouraged as never before, Ho Chi Minh re-entered his homeland in 1941 and established a new political movement, the Viet Minh, aimed at establishing an independent Vietnam. Over the following years of war and turmoil, the Viet Minh, led by communists but comprising groups across the political spectrum, gradually became the most powerful Vietnamese political movement. Ho's biggest breakthrough came in August 1945, when Japan surrendered. Suddenly, both Japan and France had been defeated or badly weakened. The path was open for the Viet Minh to claim power, which is exactly what Ho Chi Minh did on September 2nd, 1945. Standing before throngs of his countrymen, Ho declared the formation of a new nation, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Ho's declaration of Vietnamese independence was hardly, though, the end of the story. By the end of 1946, Ho Chi Minh's Democratic Republic of Vietnam was at war with France, which desperately wanted to hold on to its Southeast Asian colonies and refused to recognize Ho's declaration. Thus began 30 years of warfare to shape Vietnam's political and economic destiny, warfare in which the United States would ultimately become deeply embroiled.